one. Welcome back, everybody. This is CSUN Performance Ensemble Presents In Conversation With. I am one of your hosts. My name is Fernando Martinez.
And my name is Jefferson Denham. I'm the other host.
And today, I want to talk. I feel okay. So I wanted to have not that last week's conversation was negative because it wasn't. I think it was. It was both. I think it was positive in its own ways. But I feel like we need something that's overtly positive, right? And so
Okay.
this
And
conversation.
by the way, can I interject something? So, and maybe I mentioned it last time, but for the folks watching at home, you may have seen this story: an explosion in the market for deodorant and teeth whitening. In other words, I think we're all emerging from this cocoon of what was, and we're about not exactly the normal we left behind. It's like a new reality, right? And so I think this is a great idea, Fernando, that you've proposed where okay, let's get this off on the right foot because we can, focus on anything son or goes to college. So you understand possibly framing theory. So we're going to try to frame things in a way that helps us maybe look at life in a way that's going to give us, it'll empower us. Is that
Yeah, yeah,
fair?
I think that's yeah, that's honestly the best way to phrase it because I feel like again it's just sort of tying back to what we were talking about last week about this sort of like false positivity sort of thing that Sam was bringing up, but there are ways that we can sort of reframe um not just our values but reframe philosophies, reframe actions, reframe routines into just like do things that are more positive. And I think that we can do that at least in this space through conversation, right? And yeah, so I was just thinking I want to do something a little more light. I am, uh, I feel like I'm still crawling out of my cave, crawling out of the dark, crawling out of the space that like wasn't so good, right? Like you and I both. Um, and I just feel really good, and so I wanted to talk about things that make me feel good too, and hopefully they will make you feel good and our audience feel good. Um, and
Can I start something off, by the way? So it's
yeah,
almost Father's Day. Can I tell a dad joke?
oh, go for it, go for it. Oh man, I okay, yeah, go for it. Whenever
I've
you.
got a million of them, by the way, and they're all eye rollers. Dear audience, I'm preparing you. I may have told this one before, but here we go. Ready?
Mhm.
Jesus, already I'm going into come forth and receive eternal life. But John came fifth and he got a toaster. That's such
Oh,
a
yeah.
dad joke.
Yeah. You were right about it being an eye roller. I'm just kidding. Um, oh man,
Then,
there
wait, I
was.
got one more.
Go for it.
Did you hear about that new cafe that opened up? It's called forget it. I can't remember it now. Forget it. You had something. Save me, Fernando.
Yeah, I
Say
yeah, I wanted to ask you a question. Did you hear the rumor about butter?
the rumor about butter. No.
Oh, too bad. I don't want to spread it, man. It's so stupid. I like at the high school I a lot of dad jokes and they all dislike it. Like they tell me to log out of Zoom because they don't like it. So, and that's not even the best one. There was one that I forgot. Oh, man, I'm so sad.
You
Okay, well,
know what has a terrible eye roller joke? I wish we could have a call in thing right now. I would love to hear them back to back. That would be so great.
yeah. I can't remember what it was. I feel so sad. Well, this is an early Father's Day celebration.
Right,
Uh,
right.
the dad jokes. That's all I aspire to be is tell those jokes. Uh, yeah, but thank you for that. Um,
Hey, so can I ask you a question?
yes.
And I know you're may have, since we're all college students, have we all experienced graduation by now? I think so. And so I'm just curious to know how everybody's doing, feeling. Again, I wish this was a call-in show, but because I have now that school is the semester is wrapping up. We were just talking about this. The semester has been wrapping up for you teaching, not only at the collegiate level but in the high school level. Do you feel a sense of partly what you'll say here? But anyway, so I'm just, how do you feel about the end of the semester and looking into the summer and the future?
Um, man, well, I want to answer that in two ways. I want to answer it in what I've noticed in my students, both college students and high school students, and also just the way that I've been feeling. So what I've been noticing from the students, a lot of it is there's this like hopefulness, but not necessarily in the context of like they do understand that the world is going through a lot, right? Like there's a lot of change that needs to happen, and we need to take care of ourselves better, and that there are social issues. But I think a lot of it too is just innocent. So like they look at it as things might be getting better, so they can see their friends now. That sort of thing. Things are getting better, so they can like stop being in front of the computer because surprise, surprise, not everybody can be in front of a computer all day. It sucks. Even if you're a kid who likes to play video games all day, it's different, right? So there's that. There's a lot of like an innocent hopefulness to it, and I think that comes by virtue of them just being kids. As far as like looking at my college students, the class that I was teaching specifically was for freshmen only. So it's not like the typical comms class where it's all mixed. This is in a different department, so like it's freshmen only, and so they've never experienced college in person, which is insane to think about. And so for them, a lot of it is like they're excited to get lost. Like they're excited to go to the wrong building. They're excited to figure out like what's on campus and a lot of hope. And I think that's the thing. And for me, um, a lot of changes are down the road for me, right? And I've brought this up. Like I'm going to school in the Bay Area. I'm moving out of LA for the first time, or not the first time. Well, I'm moving out of Southern California for the first time, and I'm not gonna be living with friends. I'm living with a stranger. It's just a lot of things that are happening that are different, and for me, I'm looking at it too with not just hope, but I think also recognizing that there's been a lot of lessons along the way. It's just acknowledging that. And I want you to I want you to answer the same question, and then I want to go back to this whole idea of acknowledging the lessons because it's something that we want to talk about today, actually. But if you want to ask,
Okay.
like, you know, how has it been for you?
I'm going to answer that by, and I just shared with you, and I've always been open to your great therapy session yesterday, and it's based around the notion of radical acceptance. So let me explain what that means. It's going to sound dark, but I promise it gets to the light. So here it is. I mean, here's the cool thing about that radical acceptance says that we recognize that there is tough things to get through, right? When you're a child, you don't, I used to think what you're always striving for is this state of happiness or bliss or whatever. And if you're not in that state, something's wrong. Something's wrong with you, something's wrong with your notion. I'm still unpacking it, by the way. I haven't arrived yet. But the idea of radical acceptance acknowledges that there are challenges, there is change ahead constantly, and there's constant growth. Growth can be painful.
Mm-hmm.
We assign a definition to that growing pains or whatever as a negative. It just is. And so, in association with the radical acceptance, my therapist was getting me to recognize you can hold apparently contradictory ideas at the same time. Here it is. Can things be tough and can they still be fulfilling? let's say, or whatever you want to, if you're thinking about two things that you're like, how, be feel like the stars had aligned and everything was, easy, that everything should be easy and it shouldn't be, I think. And in a weird way, that just resonated with me, kind of like always sparking you to grow and change and adapt. And so that's kind of the space I'm in right now. So as we're ending a school year, as we're starting the summer, as we're emerging from the pandemic, it's, and so how do we acknowledge that? Acknowledge that we want it to go a certain way. That means leaving behind something that maybe felt familiar. Uh, and sometimes those things that are familiar aren't necessarily healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Self to feel a little not perfect at something. This is another thing we're talking about. Allowing yourself to feel like, and by the way, there was an instance in performance ensemble. So we're going to pepper our conversation with performance ensemble. Fernando, I don't think I've ever confided in you this feeling I had, but here it is. When I was in performance ensemble, I felt like I was an actor and I was a professional actor. Sure, I'm any good at this anymore. So I had a real crisis of confidence, and this is weird to acknowledge, but it's true. So, and this was another reason why I performing that you don't have to be perfect at it anyway. And anything that you've done in the past doesn't mean that the new now is going to be good or bad. You just let it happen, and that was a challenge for me. I'm going to be ensemble. We make it sound like it's great because it is, and it's welcoming because it is. But I never want to downplay the idea that it's challenging too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's actually a really good place to sort of start this the rest of this conversation too, when sort of talking about the idea of I don't know, like lessons learned and things that we wish we or things we wish we could have done differently, right? Is the aspect of the challenge. And it's interesting because for me going in, like it obviously, like I had zero experience, and a lot of it for me was trying to get that college experience. Like that's mostly the reason why I joined, right? Like I mean, a lot of, I don't know if people should say this specifically about CSUN. I think it's something that's all over Southern California because Southern California is huge, right? Like in population. But most Cal states, even UCs, tend to be commuter schools, right? Nobody really lives right around that school, at least typically not. You have people coming from all over. Like, I mean, we had Bree coming in from Carson, you know? It's far. Um, but the reason why I joined was because I wanted to have that college experience. After like 3 years of community college, I was like, I really just want the experience. Like, I want this so bad, but I don't know if I can even do this. But it feels like a sign because somebody I just met told me to go check it out, right? And so like that was the challenge for me, was to sort of getting over it because I was terrified of talking to people. I was terrified of public speaking, which is the greatest irony in my life, is that I used to be scared of public speaking because for anybody that's watching, I teach public. We both have taught public speaking, right? Like, um, I was scared of opening up. I was never raised to be emotionally articulate. I was never taught to be open. Like I mean, even just saying I love you to my family was weird. Like that's just how we were. I just was never taught to be good about emotions and how I feel and all that stuff. And so that was a challenge. But it's also interesting hearing your perspective because we are in Northridge, which is so close to LA. Or it's like a 30-minute drive. Probably like an hour if you got traffic, but like it's a 30-minute drive away from LA. So you do get a lot of people who are there because they want to get an education, but because they also want to be actors, right? Like that's just so common in Cal State LA, and at CSUN, at UCLA, at USC, whatever. That's so common, and we do tend to get a lot of um, actors join the ensemble, and it's never one of those things where we think, "Oh God, an actor," you know. Like we welcome everybody. Like that really is true. But in my mind, whenever I know that somebody's an actor, um, I think to myself, I hope that they're prepared because it's going to be weird. These are two different realities. These are two different worlds. So when I knew that you were an actor, I was like, it might be rough for you, you know. But luckily, you do have people around you that care enough, even if you've never met them. You know, even if we barely know each other, they're gonna care about you and like they'll help you along the way. Um, so it's really interesting to hear from you because I mean, it's happened before where we've had other people who are actors too. Like they struggled, like they just could not. I don't know, like they just couldn't figure out how to exist in that space and not also exist in this like acting space, right? Like because they're two different things. So that's it's funny and it's interesting.
Can I yeah, let me respond to that because I feel like and if anybody has any theater experience, this is the beautiful thing about performance ensemble in my view, and I think I've expressed this how to be an actor and what that entails, but this is so much deeper. The only this is a strange uh, weak, I should say, comparison, but it's kind of like understanding improv for the first time when you all you've done has been the challenge. We were talking earlier about challenges. The challenge when you feel like, okay, I already know how to do this, right? I already know how to be an actor. I know how to perform. Uh, I always find that to be a very into it, but because there's always something wonderful and new to learn. There was a guy, a friend of a friend, who was the bass player for Saturday Night Live, and basically that was his mantra: is that I'm always I may have the greatest, one of the greatest gigs on the planet, being in the band at Saturday Night Live, but I approach everything with humility because there's something cool and new to learn. And I was just really confronted, might be the wrong uh, notion. When I got to PE, I realized you can't kind of like fall back on your theatrical tricks. You got to really be there. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so, so that was my experience.
yeah, no,
Anyway.
that absolutely makes sense, and I feel like that happens to anybody that comes from anything that it may not even have to be acting, right? Like if you so like I did a lot of, and we'll get to the rest of the conversation. This is just interesting because I want to talk about this, but like I came from, I feel like I
Cool.
always had a phase, like I always had a creative phase, right? And even though I never necessarily stuck to one thing, or at least up until that point I hadn't, it's always something that's creative. So it used to be drawing, it used to be painting, it became oh, why is there's sorry, the dog just came up. Um, and then it became music, and then it became poetry and performance and that sort of stuff. Um, but I think that everybody just comes in with something, and it becomes really hard to sort of code switch, you know, because that's what it is. A lot of code switching, and if you're not aware of that, it becomes it's just a really odd experience to have to live through it, right? To have to experience that code switching. Um, and so I think a lot of what's difficult, a lot of the challenges comes from that. Um, but again, like in any sort of process, if you have good parts to it, it becomes easier, it becomes more enjoyable, and I think that that's what PE has. And that being said, because we are talking about challenges, I want to talk about things that we've learned, right? And this might be hard
Yeah.
to answer like right in the moment, but if you can think of anything, I sort of want to discuss what lessons do you feel you've learned through the ensemble by being a member, by technically being a director, by writing your own piece, by experiencing the black box with other people. What lessons
Mm,
have you learned?
I love that question. And I'm going to ask you the same question. So I think, and this is part of growth, the code switching. I love that. One thing I feel like I've learned is that I was kind of trapped in a way, thinking my identity was an actor. Like the only man could be in this certain vein. And what performance ensemble taught me was that if you have, this is exactly what you just said, what you were alluding to, that you are realize, wait, this creative spark can manifest itself in a bunch of different ways. It does not have to be pigeonholed in one thing. And so that to me was a really cool eye opener. Recognize you don't dictate, the only way it can manifest itself, because it's so much fun to discover. It's scary. You're getting out there on the high wire kind of thing, but then you what you're capable of doing, and you're discovering things about who you are. So that's something I learned. So how about you, my friend?
Yeah, so I actually I I think I want to preface this by talking about something that happened. When was it? Last week, I think. I was in the valley, and we had a dinner with, like, me and my partner had a dinner with another couple, and it was a fully vaccinated dinner, right? Um, and we were still being safe and everything, but we had this dinner with this couple, and I think everybody knew what everybody did for a living, or what they studied, or what their work was. But the other guy, and the other couple didn't know what I did, right? Like, didn't know what I studied. And so I was like, oh, I study performance. I've studied communication. I'm going to study performance up next. And he was like, what does that mean? It's a fun question, right? Like, how do you ever answer what performance studies is? I don't know. Nobody knows, right? And so, but I was just explaining to him, like, a lot of the things that I study tend to be things that you don't think about when you think of performance, right? So a lot of cultural stuff, a lot of rituals, a lot of all these different bits that I like to study. And then Lindsay was all like, "Oh, but he also studies spatial politics." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, like I do that a lot. Like I study a lot of spatial politics." And they asked me, "Was like, what is that?" Like they've never heard of it, right? And so like I apparently do this thing where I get really amped up when people ask me that question. I like roll up my sleeve and I get all excited, and I speak with my hands when I'm very like I'm just super animated. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but when I like get into something, I always
No.
but like and so I started doing that, and on the drive home after the dinner, we were just talking about how she's just telling me how like it's for her it's like a good experience seeing me get so excited about things that I'm studying and things that I'm doing. And because I had forgotten to mention that I also study spatial politics, she was like, when the guy had asked like, "What is spatial politics?" Like she also said, "Well, like he's doing all these things, but like you don't always want to have to write something down. I mean, it's not always accessible to everybody because not everybody has access to a higher level education, right? And so there's other ways of doing it, and you can do it by performing. You can go perform it on stage. You can record it on YouTube, like we've done, and post it online. Make it free. It's free access for education and information. And I think the lesson that I learned from being in PE, and that's why I brought up this story, is that it gives you a different avenue to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, even if it's not directly related to performance, right? So, um, one of my biggest things is, I think, liberation from a lot of social political constraints that a lot of people of color, specifically a lot of Mexican American or Salvadorian American people, suffer, right? Because that's who I am. That's what I've experienced, and so I want to do that. I want to educate. Um, I want to educate in a way that a lot of groups have not been educated in, right? In a system that has been predominantly for and by white men. Um, And so that's what it does for me. And for other people, it did absolutely different things. For some people, and this is just from actually talking to other people that were in the ensembles, that it allowed them to seek therapy for the first time. You know, like it has done so many different things. It creates an avenue. And I think that's the lesson that I learned, is that sometimes, um, I think that the struggle, without having to, man, without glorifying struggle, right? That sometimes
Mm,
struggle does tend to lead to better things, and in this case it does. If you're struggling because you were an actor, now you have to do theater, or like performance art, I mean, or if you are a very socially awkward person, or if you suffer from anxiety that's induced by being around people, it can do those things for you. And for me, it sort of bloomed all these ideas that I have for like how I want to teach, how I want others to know what I know, or learn the things that I have learned, or learn things before I get to learn them, so that I can learn from them. Like that's what it's done. And I think ultimately the lesson is, sometimes it's good to have new avenues, and I think performance can do that for people.
agreed. And you know what? Something that just popped into my head based on what you were just saying. I saw a great TED talk that was talking about storytelling and the story. Well, I have been told, or I'm supposed to believe about myself, that I only exist in a certain way. Oh, I would never go skydiving, let's say, or I'd never do this or that or the other. And I say, why not? I'm saying this to myself, and why can't I be someone who tries this or gets my doctorate or whatever? And so you're giving yourself permission instead of waiting for permission. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. um yeah, and honestly too, like,
And again, this is tons of therapy calling.
that's good. And what's interesting too, though,
Oh,
is
it's so good.
I can think of so many people too that I feel like this applies to them, right? The people that we've worked with, and I think that it does a beautiful thing. And with that being said, because I feel like we both have had really good potentially life changing lessons learned, right? And it applies to every aspect of our lives, aside from school, outside of academia, outside of performance. But now I want to talk about something that I think is still positive, just in a different way. Like you said, it's sort of reformatted, right? So things that we wish we could have done differently. I don't think that's a negative thing. I think people tend to spin it to being a negative thing, but is there something in your time in with the ensemble that you wish you would have done differently?
I wish I would have had more of a sense of acceptance of myself to stay. This is going to sound, again, I feel like I'm in my confessional whenever I talk to you, Fernando, or whenever I talk to you, dear audience. But I was only in performance ensemble one semester. The second semester, I was having kind of an emotional meltdown. I just felt not unworthy, but like I had no sense of self worth. I just felt like I didn't know what to bring to the table with performance ensemble. And I got to confess, a lot of it is baggage from like, I should be better, or I should know more, or I should whatever. And there's a lot of shaming. So if I could do anything differently, I would have said to myself, stick it out. You're in a you're in a and work through it. But I had to do what I had to do, and so but I kind of wish I had enough strength. I just didn't have it then, but I wish I had enough strength to just stick it out, ride that horrible the other side, and still be in performance ensemble. I wish I had been able to do that.
Yeah, and again, like, and thank you for sharing. Like, obviously, that's something that I knew. 'Cause, like, you opened up about it to me, and I mean, I think a lot of people didn't know that. Like I was saying earlier, I think that if anybody's hearing this, without the context of the rest of the conversation, it sounds like it's a negative thing, like it's a sad thing. Like, but it isn't. I think that that still provides a lot of things that you learned from, and I think it provides something for others to learn from as well, right? And I sort of want to talk about what I,
So the question, wait, before we move on, I want to ask you the same question.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was actually gonna answer it because I was trying to phrase
Okay.
it as like, um, that it's interesting that you brought that up because I feel like when a lot of people think of me, at least in the context of PE, think that like I've got it down, and I don't, you know. Um, and I bring that up because, like you, I've also had a very similar experience, and I think that I might have briefly brought this up. That there was a semester where we did a show and I didn't say a single word, right? And so that's always been the story that I tell people because it's true. I didn't say a single word in that performance, and I think a lot of people generally applauded the show because they really enjoyed it, but applauded me because they thought it was an interesting, like, creative direction to take to have somebody be a through line in a show and not say a single thing. Because like I was in every single piece and made like a prominent entrance in every single part of those pieces, just never said anything, right? But there was a lot more to that, and so one thing that I wish I could have done better was um, recognize that I needed help. And so I want to get to that story. Is this was I think the second semester that I was in PE. Still recently transferred to CSUN, right? And at the time, I think I was going through the worst emotional breakdown that I've ever experienced. And I had just finished the previous semester where I had to make up um, my GPA, right? Because I was on academic probation, like because I had done so bad because it was a new experience. I was still struggling mentally too, and so that a lot of that led to that. And so I just finished a rough like 6 class semester. Took 6 classes in one semester. I was working. I was doing everything I possibly could to make things better because like I wanted to be there, right? So I did it. Now all that pressure is gone, and I thought I was gonna be happy, and I wasn't. Like I was just struggling emotionally, and it was so bad, and I was asking nobody for help. I felt not like that. I thought it'd be embarrassing, but I just felt like it would have been overbearing, you know, to tell somebody, hey, like I'm depressed, like you know, like what are they gonna do for me? That's what my mindset was. And so when it came down to the show, like I was writing a piece, and this was before Jader Pavi was directing. This I think Janine was directing the ensemble at this point. Um, and I told her I was like I don't think I can write anything. Um, you know, and she offered me the space to talk and to figure it out, and I just didn't take it. And she was like, well, it's fine if you don't say anything. I still want you in the show, so if you want to be in the show, talk to the people who are writing their pieces and see how they can use you. And so everybody used me in their piece. And so even though that part was cool, like I think the one thing I wish I could have done differently was ask for help. Like when it was offered, it's like ask for help. But like you, I also felt like I had to do what I had to do, right? Like it sort of felt like a survival thing, and that isn't always the healthiest thing for every single person. Obviously, every individual is different and is going through unique circumstances, right? But for me at the time, it felt like survival, and that's the way that I was coping with it. But I wish I would have done something differently, even if you know, because even if I had reached out for help and I decided to not say anything in the show, it still would have been better than to have not asked for help and not say anything, right? Because like you come first, right? Like you are more important than a show. You are more important than um I don't know. You know, like you're more important than your own health is a lot more important than a lot of other things in this world.
What
Uh,
I love about your story, by the way, is that I feel like kind of what you just said. It's more about just learning from it what you're meant to get out of it. And sometimes it's just that. Like I don't need to say anything, but I do need to learn to ask for help. I was just all seeing these kind of shows. Someone's in trouble, but because of their pride or whatever, they're not telling anybody, and it's making the whole situation worse. And it takes some courage to say, I need help. And so I'm going to say I can relate to what you said, and I'm going to guess a lot of our audience can relate to that too.
yeah, and Yeah, I think that's always like the biggest step that you can take. It's just like recognizing that you do need the help. But yeah, that's something that I wish I would have done differently. And again, it sounds really negative, but it really isn't. And I think that just, I mean, this whole conversation is about, I think, taking something positive with you from the experience, right? And so, even though that experience wasn't positive, I look back at it now because this was 5 years ago. And even though I still occasionally have emotional breakdowns, because it's not something that just disappears, I'm a lot better about opening up. Um,
Mm.
like we open up with each other all the time. I'm a lot better about asking for help when I know that I do need help, when I know that I can't do things on my own. Um, and I think, okay, so because I sort of want to reframe this too with anybody that's interested in joining, right? Because the semester is ending, a new semester is starting. We're gonna have more people watching these episodes. Is I guess I want to talk to you or ask you about, um, having discussed what we discussed. What would you tell anybody that's interested in joining PE?
I would say that if you've thought about it, maybe you're just thinking about it now, for the very first time. So if you're thinking about it now, uh, I would say these episodes incorporate this experience, even if it's for just one semester, into your collegiate career, because it allows you to explore something. It's completely like, okay, if I hit this many points in my test, I get an A or whatever. It's not like that. It's given you the freedom, the power, if you will, to explore who you really are. Part of college. That's a big part of life. Who are you? Are you this accumulation of grades, or is there more to you than that? And so uh, I would suggest, highly recommend that you and explore it. Explore yourself, even if it's like Fernando said, you don't have to be the star. You don't have to do anything. The expectation is just to be truer to yourself. If
Mm-hmm.
you go in with that norm, you don't have to people please. You just have to be who you are. Oh, and come with a willing attitude to support others.
Mm-hmm.
Make no mistake about that. You're there, yes, to kind of discover something about yourself. And by the way, this to me is a wonderful attribute for any human being. How do I contribute? So those are the two big things. If you come into this experience knowing that these are the things that you'd like to just expand in your human, how to live as a human, this is a perfect time to take something like this. And I personally highly recommend it. So what would you say to that question, Fernando?
Yeah, I actually, so I think that this is a piece of advice that I don't even know if we've given, or honestly if I've ever thought about until now, because this conversation sort of sparking this, right? But I think what I would say is, I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this, you're going to join, and I hope that you do. And I'm also going to say that you should go in expecting to be scared, but not because you're not going to be in a safe place, not because there's going to be any harm coming your way, whether that's physical or emotional, because your emotional health is important, your physical health is important to us. But I think that you should go in knowing that you're going to be scared, and you have to use that, I think, as a sort of balance, right? Because I went into it scared, and I remain scared to ask for help, and I remain scared to do all these other things for me and for others, when I could have spoken up. And so I think it's good for people to know that once they go in there, it is going to be scary, right? Not because we expect you, like you said, like we've been discussing, like it's not because we expect you to be a star, because we expect you to be perfect at your craft, because we expect you to even have a craft, because you don't have to have one, right? Like you can come in clean slate if you had to, if that's even possible, right? At like 20 years old, you're a clean slate for some reason, right? Like you don't need to come in with anything. I think it's just knowing that if that it's knowing that it is going to be scary. Um, and if that's the baseline that you're starting at, it can only get better, right? What's worse than being scared? You're still going to be scared, right? Like that's you can't go any lower than that. You're going to be scared, and it gets
Right.
a lot better than that. And I think that you can use a lot of that, a lot of those fears, um, to overcome them or to reclaim a lot of them on stage because and this is something that I didn't get to, but when I had that really difficult semester, the following semester I really wanted to reclaim my space on stage. Like it was gonna be my last semester as an undergrad. I still wasn't thinking about grad school at the time. And I was like, I really need to do something not to wow an audience or my own um, the cohort there or my director. I want to do this for me. I want to know that when I graduate out of here, that I left having reclaimed all these like ghosts that I had, right? Like all these demons that I had, that I associated with the stage, and do this for me. So I think that if you start off knowing that you're going to be scared, and if anything ever goes any direction other than good, you can reclaim that. And I think that's the beauty of it, right? That's one of I think that one of the um, almost like superpower that you gain out of being in PE is that you have a way of reframing things. And I love that you brought that word up because that's so like it's one of the most important things about P is that it lets you reframe things. So it lets
Right.
you reframe academic work into something that's more easily digestible for people. That's easier access. It lets you reframe a lot of your fears, a lot of your anxieties, a lot of your struggles in a way that's healthy. That helps you reclaim that allows you to truly accept and love who you are despite all these other things. And so I think that's what I would say, to anybody who's curious or to everybody that should be joining, it would be that.
Right. And we hope all of you who are watching, and if you haven't done it yet, now this is your invitation. We're
Yeah. And
talking.
and if that didn't work, then hopefully JD performing his poem right now will.
Right. So Fernando and I were talking that we want to not just speak, and so we wanted to share with you some things that we have worked on. And so this is one, I think it's apropos to our discussion. It's called "How Do I Not Drown?" All right. So here we go. Slowly opening, and I'm in the midst of the ocean. I think it's the ocean. The light is dim. I can't tell if the day is dawning or if evening is upon me. Are things about to get better, daybreak, or about to get much worse, the sun business? I hear the water and I feel the ebb and flow of the waves as a powerful influence that pushes me this way and that. It's much stronger than me. I'm staying above water for the moment, but for how long? Why did I never learn how to swim? Maybe I just survived a crash landing. Maybe I'm entering into a dream. Okay, the water started off as murky, but now I'm seeing a cityscape appear before me as if masked by a heavy fog, but the fog is now dissipating. I see the sidewalk appear beneath my feet as the fog and water subsides, but it still feels like I'm wobbly and I'm trying to get my bearings and I catch my equilibrium. The sensation of the power of the ocean is now being replaced by billboards and radio signals and slogans and protests and right wing radio and partisan bickering. I get up again, but the forces are still at work. How do I not drown? Why did I never learn how to swim? Okay, I close my eyes to see if I can find my own voice. Radio frequency. I'm determined to boost the signal and tune into this pirate radio station. It's illegal. It's against the rules. It's pure. It is free of. I slowly open my eyes, but with clarity now. The radio signal is getting stronger. The chaos and cacophony is still at work all around me, but they're losing their power. The more they scream and whine and implore me, the more at peace my soul becomes. The more they insist on control, the more I am in control of myself. Their machinations are so much more obvious now. Now, how could I not? Well, no matter. Their increasingly frantic and grotesque behavior is almost comical, revealing just how insecure the powers that be really are. I now find myself slowly climbing the stone steps of the temple in the middle tension in my heart. I enter the inner courtyard. I see the slaughter of all these sacrificial animals, which has somehow been forced upon us as normal, as accepted business practice, so as to perpetuate the ritual. I locate the finance center, follow the money, as they say. I step up to the money changers table, and in the midst of the mergers and acquisitions and hidden Bermuda bank accounts and sleight of hand, the government, in the midst of backroom deals and casting couches where you have to suck someone's cock to get a promotion or not get fired, I pick up the money changers table by one of its corners and I heave it with all of my mind. Business as usual, fly in all directions. And for a brief moment, everyone is frozen in stunned silence. And for a brief moment, we all equal. Oh, it's on. The war has begun. The game has been reset. How do we not drown? By finally learning how to swim.
Oh my gosh,
And scene.
you're. I feel I say this every single time, and I think I say it differently every single time. But your ending lines always feel like my soul is getting stabbed. You know, like it feels like it reaches into my soul, and I'm just like like it like grips. You know, that's what it feels like when I listen to yourself. Because that's the thing too with
Oh, man.
it's no it like it's a good thing. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's one of those things that people think it's negative, but it's not. To me, it's a beautiful, positive thing. And the thing about listening to you performing is whether you're writing a story or a poem or anything, it still comes off as storytelling in a more what like traditional sense, but it's a poem, you know. But you're hearing a whole story, and I love that. And it's this, um, I don't know. It's like this wave that's like getting closer and closer to shore, you know. And that last line is always when it hits the rocks at the shore, and it just stops. And that's what it feels like when I listen to you.
Hmm.
Um, that was beautiful. Thank you for
Well,
sharing.
thank you. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the kind words. And so, folks, again, I wish we had a call in show. I would love to hear. By the way, before we get to your magic and your brilliant, any sort of show coming up or no?
Is that what?
Are we going to have any sort of
Yeah,
opportunity for our listeners to have it so we can have a show?
yeah. No, we are. It's just it's been getting hectic. You know, a lot of things are happening, but it's going to happen. I will not rest. This season will not end until we have that happen. I think.
Boom. All right. So now, but the show, this particular episode cannot end unless we hear from you, my friend. So what are you going to share with us?
Okay. Earlier we were talking about a lot of changes happening, and a while back I wrote something, and every time I read it, I only think of changes. So this is a temporary home. One, the backyard. How invigorating to find yourself surrounded by wooden giants, a collection of earth material, and how good it feels to breathe in to understand what people mean when they say they can feel colors, to feel the small, shorter waves that traveled our direction, a baby blue sky covered in cotton cleverly placed thousands of feet up high. I know what a fan brush stroke looks like. It is capturing moments where we capture moments sketched on 2 by 3 film. There is never enough time to take in everything we wish to take with us. It is only a temporary home, but for now, it is perfect. 2. The village. How invigorating to find yourself getting lost in light that travels the shortest, a collection of earth material. It is stumbling your way across a formation of rocks, one bigger than the other, legs and arms moving in abrupt motion. It is more than a handful of lines, it is poetry observed. Every step, pause, and slip is perfectly orchestrated. It is making your way to the end of the world to face the most beautiful, endless body of water. Blanketed by different shades of blue, it is incredible how the colors projected above change so quickly. It is finding love in evening plum hanging up high, how a pale orange drips down with every passing minute, a change worth capturing only through the eye. It is only a temporary home, but for now, it is perfect.
Wow. Yeah, okay. Wow. So I'll let our audience kind of absorb that while I say. And so here's the things that I love about that particular piece, one and two. It just feels like there's like a, a rhythm to it that you've set us up as in the audience. I'm a big fan of making sure the audience is always with you. And I always feel that with you. Uh, Song lyrics where they can make in a short phrase, you get this, it unpacks all of this emotional punch. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of like by saying a few words, all of a sudden we're all experiencing some. And I just love your observations. How you phrase your observations puts us all in there. You were saying that I'm a storyteller. I feel like you're like a verbal filmmaker as you are talking. So, and I find that completely powerful and engaging. So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I've always wanted to share this, I think, on the show, and I never have. So I'm really happy to have done that. And I think, I think with that and all the wonderful things that we discussed today, and, the excitement of having our audience participate in performing with us, is a perfect place to end today's show, which to me it has been positive despite all the stories that we discussed that didn't feel that way. But I mean, it's just positive, a lot of things that we've learned, and hopefully these are things that you can keep in mind and things that you can learn from as an audience and just as people, as performers, as students, as brothers, as sisters, um but yeah, thank you for the wonderful conversation. This has been CSUN Performance Ensemble presents In Conversation with. My name is Fernando. I am one of the hosts.
And my name is Jefferson Denham. I'm the other host.
And how do we even have a line? We don't have a line, huh? Maybe that's for season 3, I think.
Yeah, I'm just going to wave right now. I'm going to give you the wave.
Yeah, okay.